Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fish Tank. Hopefully you're doing well. Today we're going to be looking at the new patch for our favourite free-to-play game, Minion Masters. If you've been following along with Minion Masters, you'll know that we're in the Furry Fury expansion, and this is going to be the second in the 3 patches for this. But what are we going to be enjoying? Let's find out. Okay, so as mentioned, Furry Fury. So this patch is going to have a name, and this is going to be called the Mechanized Menace. And as you see the new card shortly, you'll know why. So this is going to be version 1.44. It's going to be dropping Thursday the 2nd of February. As always, there's going to be a new season pass. There's going to be new cards, a new skin, some balance changes, and of course, some bug squishing. What cards are we going to have? Well, let's have a look. So we'll see from the season pass, we're going to have 2 new cards there. We're going to see a KP skin. There's some new avatars and an emo. And of course, a ton of stuff that you can get. And as you'll see, this expansion is going to be Scrat themed. So if you're a Scrat lover, you're going to enjoy this. So the first new card, and the showpiece card of this expansion, is Vux, Clutch Cooker. What's a Clutch Cooker? No idea, but let's find out what he does. So this chap's a 6 mana ranged Scrat minion. So he's got 450 health, which is the same as the Defenso Chopper for comparison states, and he has the same DPS as a Woodsman. Now he has a ton of keywords. Let's look at them. So his main attack is a Flamethrower. Here you can see it deals damage in a cone in front of him, does 150 damage over 3 seconds with a radius of 5. Now he also has a Grappling Claw, so this will pull a nearby ground enemy to him. If that ground enemy is immovable, like a building or something, then he will be pulled to it instead. The Master Tower doesn't affect him. So this is going to be really useful, for example, pulling an Idol of Sacrifice off your face, something like that. That could be really, really cool. He also has Piloted. Now Piloted is a minion skill that we've seen on a bunch of Scrat cards before. When they die, they drop a Scrat. And as we'll see in this expansion, Piloted is going to be spread so it can be a multi-faction thing. So the unit that drops will be dependent on the faction of the unit that died. So in this case, this is a Scrat unit, so it will drop a Scrat. And for comparison states, we'll see in a minute, they'll be the same with Outlander units, and they'll drop Marines. So he'll drop a Scrat when he dies. And his final keyword is the Bombard. As you see there, if you have at least 3 piloted cards in your deck, he's piloted himself, so you need him plus 2 other piloted cards in your deck. He'll do a Bombard on spawn. So that's only 1 time when you spawn him. And the Bombard is going to be kind of like the way a Boom Buggy will attack. So he's got shoulder rockets. I believe there's 6 of them. And they'll do 210 damage in total over a range of 12. That's just 1 Bombard when he spawns. So he's going to be available in both the free pass and the season pass. Of course, you do get him right at the start of the season pass and in tier 49 of the free pass. Let's have a look at what Vuk looks like as a unit in the game. So he's a pretty substantial Scrat unit. You can see there you've got his Flamethrower, his Grappling Hook, and his shoulder rockets for the Bombard. Very cool looking unit. Okay, so Vuk is the first of the new cards. The second new card is the Net Blaster. So the Net Blaster, as you will probably imagine, shoots a net. So he's a 4 mana ranged Scrat minion. So he shoots a net that inflicts Grounded. Now Grounded's a new keyword, but it does the same as what Unholy Ground does. So it grounds flying minions and immobilizes them. So that's what Grounded does. Interestingly, he is only allowed to be wildcarded once, so he's got quite a powerful crowd control effect, so I think it's important that his wildcards are held in some kind of restriction. So you can see there he's got 120 health, so pretty squishy, and he does 50 damage per attack every 5 seconds. So he's got enough damage to squish the Horde, for example. Now, he's going to be available in the Season Pass at Tier 22 or in the Free Pass at Tier 38. And this is what the Net Blaster looks like as a unit in the game. Cool looking Scrat unit. And I think if you're familiar with Project F4E, you would have probably seen this guy in Project F4E and will have definitely been annoyed by his nets. Okay, so those are the 2 new cards that we've got coming. As always, there's going to be a new skin. And I must say, Beta Dwarf have been knocking it out of the park with the new skins recently. And this time, we've got an awesome looking Dark Fury, Crystal Dark Fury, King Puff skin. So a really nice looking skin here. Something I'll look forward to getting hold of. King Puff is a master I like to play. And as we'll see in the balance changes, some tweaks to the way that King Puff plays as well. Okay, so that's the new content, the new skins, and the new skin, the new cards, emotes, etc. And as always, we'll now look at the balance changes. So first of all, let's look at the buffs. So there's a buff to the black hole. Simply the duration that the black hole lasts for and protects you for is up from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. So it can now protect fully against a magma storm, which previously it couldn't. Now we have a small change to the magnetic bombs. Just a small HP increase from 50 to 60. Remember, these have to roll from your tower to find a target. So a little bit more HP gives them more of a chance of getting to a target before they get DPS down. Now, Siegebreaker Mark 1. This is a card that definitely needed some love. Is it enough love? I'm not sure. But let's see. So, you may not have been aware because it's very hard to notice. But the Siegebreaker did originally have AoE attack. So that's an area of effect attack. So when it did shoot, it would damage units in an area. But it was a very small area. It was only a range of 1. That's gone up to 1.5. Is that much of a change? Not sure. We'll see when we check it out. And it also gains Piloted. As we mentioned before, Piloted now is a keyword that can be applied to any faction. And what the unit is... The unit piloting will depend on the faction. So Scrats will get Scrats. And Outlanders will get Marines. Now, one thing to mention, the Razor Squadron has also been given this keyword, but it already had the piloted ability. It already dropped the Marines, but now it's been given the piloted ability. And that's, I think, specifically so it can be used with Vuck and trigger his Bombard. Right, next up, we have the rebalances. So rebalances are where something is changed in a big way, or in multiple ways that may be a buff, maybe a nerf. And we got some big changes here. First, a change to APEP. So the first thing that's going to change is APEP's auto attack. So the bonus attack speed for 5+ cards is going to be removed. He will now attack 2 targets, or up to 2 targets, every 2 seconds, and he'll do 40 damage. So that's 40 damage to 1 target, or 40 damage each to 2 targets. And now a big change is his perk 1 and his perk 3. That's the free 2 mana card at perk 1 and the 3 4 mana card at perk 3. They're going to be changed to, instead of being a cycle-based perk, they're going to be a timer-based perk. And that's going to be on a 25-second timer. So what does that mean? Well, to take advantage of a cycle-based perk, you want a cheap deck. So people that play APEP tend to be forced to play cheap decks to take advantage of this. Changing it from cycle to timer means that you don't have that deck building restriction. A cheap deck or an expensive deck will still be getting the perk value at the same rate. So that's an interesting change, and hopefully frees APEP from that restriction. Also, it gives the devs another knob to turn when it comes to balancing, because they can change the amount of time it takes for the perks to pop. At the moment it's 25 seconds. If that's too strong, then they can change that to 30 seconds, for example. Now, one of the things to notice, you're probably thinking, is that a buff or is that a nerf? Well, it depends really what sort of deck you're playing. If you're playing a super cheap deck, the timer may count against you. If you're playing a more expensive deck, then the timer may count in your favor. But one thing to notice is the mana rate is not the same during a match. It starts off and then it gets faster as the match progresses. So that means at the start of the match, your cycle is slower than it will be at the end of a match because of the way that the mana is faster at the end of the match. The opposite of that is the timer will not be affected by that, so you won't be able to get that increase as the mana increases. It will always be 25 seconds regardless of the time. So obviously that's going to be a big nerf, I think, in the later stages of the game, where you could be cycling really quickly with a cheap deck, whereas now you're going to have to wait for 25 seconds, especially in Mana Frenzy. You're not going to be able to just churn through your deck super quickly and get these free cards. You're going to have to wait for 25 seconds. One thing also to notice is the mana is slower in 2v2, so the timer effect could be slightly different in that change. This is a change I like. I think it gives them more control over the balancing, as mentioned, and it gives people more deck building options when it comes to playing such a master. So I like this change. Is it going to change APEP for the stronger or the weaker? We'll see when we get our hands on him. Right, next up, a similar change to Diona. So again, her perks, perk 1 and perk 3, which are the crossbow trap and the decoy trap, alternating between those. Again, that has been changed from cycle to timer, again 25 seconds. So that means, again, you're not forced to have a cheap deck just to get the maximum value out of the perks. Again, I like that change. We'll see how that affects her strength overall. Now the bear traps, which is her passive, the bear traps spawn alternatingly in one of the 2 lanes. They no longer have stealth. I don't like that hugely because it's a buff for rammer players, really. Rammer players tend to not pay attention to where the bear trap is and get their rammers stuck in them. Now they don't have to pay attention, they can just look. So that's some changes for some masters, but we've still got more master changes. As mentioned earlier, we looked at the new King Puff skin. King Puff is going to get a change to his perk 2. So his perk 2 is the Royal Gifts, where you get a random gift. Now this is going to be, instead of every 45 seconds you get 2 gifts, now every 22 seconds you get 1 random gift. So it's kind of the same rate, but it's more regular. So it's 1 random gift. There is an increased pickup radius, so hopefully that'll make it easier to use. And this is kind of a change, but also a bug fix. When you pick up a free spell from your perk 2, it should have been random each time, whereas previously it was random per match. So if you picked up a Glen's Brew, it was always going to be a Glen's Brew for that match. Now it should be a random one each match. Is that a buff? Is that a nerf? Not really sure. It makes it more interesting to play, I think. So that's nice. And one thing to mention, the perk 2, 22 seconds, can still be reduced by using the 4 to 7 mana cards as previous. Right. And still another master change. Now a change to Milloween. Now Milloween's perk 1, her Arcane Golem. The Arcane Golem is going to be mythic. I've been calling this for a long time. I like this change. Why is it a rebalance and not just a nerf? Well, the fact that a golem can be mythic can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on the situations. Now, mythic is a nerf if you consider you can only have 1 out at a time. But also, you can't use Spawn of Fury on it. So, in those situations, it's a nerf. But when's it a buff? Well, it will only take 50% kill damage from a Wizard Puff or a Lightning Bolt, something like that. And it also can't be moved around with Impetus Blast, Lele's Vortex, etc. So that's a buff there. But I think overall that's a nerf. The fact you can only have 1 out at a time, especially at the end, deep into a game, we'll see. We'll see. I think that's where the nerf will be felt most by the Milloween players. So I like that change. And as we'll see as we go forward, if you've been a Milloween player that plays Spawn of Fury Colossus, or if you hate playing against that, we're going to see some changes that will affect that. Right, so here we see some rebalances to some units. So the Annihilator. Annihilator apparently the most used unit in the game, I think the devs said. Partially because it's something you get right at the start of the game. So his attack cooldown is going up. So that means he attacks more slowly, but his AoE radius is going up from 3 to 4. So worse single target DPS, but bigger kind of overall splash damage. And that kind of fits more in with, if you look at his flavor text, this is as big as gun gets. Yes, it does area damage, deals damage in a large area. Now he does so even more so. I think that's a nice change for the Annihilator, but the Annihilator's Achilles heel has always been his lack of HP. 150 HP is just too little for a 5 mana card. So I think that's why you very rarely see the Annihilator outside of decks that really need an Outlander ranged minion. Now we see a change to Feng the Wanderer. Mana going down from 6 to 5, but consequently the health going down from 400 to 325. Probably see him more if he's cheaper. Lower health means less buffs as well. So we'll see how he works out. Next up, Flightless Dragons. So Flightless Dragons were a card that was everywhere, and then they kind of got moved from 4 to 5 mana, and then they got Voidborn Wound, and you found them only really in Voidborn Wound, Voidborn based decks. Now that's being changed, so the Voidborn Wound has been removed, and they now gain Rage if you have less health than your opponent. So I think that's a healthy change, and probably one that'll see the Flightless Dragons used in more decks. Of course, they are very weak, only 100 HP, but their DPS, that's 50 DPS each. There's 3 of them, and of course, if they get raged, that's another 50% as well. So their DPS can be substantial, especially when used as defensive abilities. Next up, we have a change to the Nether Step. We saw Nether Step gain Invoke recently. Now it gains a double Invoke. So it's going to invoke twice when you use it. Remember, Invoke is the keyword that replaces a Voidborn card in your hand with one more value's worth, but it keeps its previous cost. Now, the Invoke going up to double Invoke, that can affect the same card twice, or it can affect 2 cards once. And the jump distance has been reduced from 10 down to 6. I think the devs didn't like it being used as something that completely could remove a unit out of a fight. So a change there. Are we going to see more Nether Step? Not sure. The fact that it is Invoke based means that it is slightly restricted in your deck building chances. Now a big change to Rock Rivals. This is the card that is very, very common, very, very strong, but now it's going to get changed. So previously you would spawn it, your opponent would get the statue only on the first time, and then you would always get your cheap blue golem with Taunt. That's being changed now. So you will get a mana reduction from 6 down to 4, but the offshoot of that is the living statue for your opponent is spawned every single time that you play it. The living statue doesn't have haste anymore though. So that means you're always going to have to deal with the statue. So it makes it easier for the devs to balance. It makes it more interesting to use because you're always going to have to be cognizant of that living statue and dealing with it. One of the things I thought about was that if you have Simulacrum and you get the Rock Rivals, it was always frustrating before because you would always have to deal with the statue and it would always cost you the max amount. Whereas now getting Rock Rivals from the Simulacrum is not such a bad thing because it's basically you have the same as your opponent would have, and of course you can haste it. So that's a slight sort of niche situation, but if you're an APET player, that might be something that you consider. Right, next up is a rebalance to the Stun Blast. So Stun Blast, mana down from 4 to 3, but the stun duration down from 5 seconds to 4 seconds. Stun is very strong. A 4-second stun is still very strong. For 3 mana, a big AoE stun, we don't hate that at all. And of course it does mark the enemies that it hits. So if you've got some ranged units DPSing them, that's going to be a nice buff as well. Next up, we're going to look at the nerfs. What has been OP this season? What do we want to see nerfed? Let's see if those are addressed. Now, Bearvalanche has been very strong. That was one of the latest cards. So the damage from the Bearvalanche is going down from 180 to 160. So only a small change, but there's some key units that can no longer kill. Things like a Boom Buggy and a Blast Monster if you do manage to get full damage on it. Remember, the Bearvalanche spell moves, so you do have to use your targeting carefully. Now, the master damage is going down from 50% to 10%, so that's a nerf, but it's also kind of a buff because the master damage was bugged last season and it actually did 0 damage. But regardless of what it was before, it's going to be 10% master damage. City Watch, that's always on people's lips with cards that are too strong. The change to City Watch this time is the initial summons. So instead of getting a Legionnaire and 2 crossbow dudes, you're going to get 3 crossbow dudes to start with, and then 3 additional Legionnaires that are free, of course, shuffled into your deck. Is that enough to bring City Watch into a balanced state? Well, let's think about it. You've got 3 crossbow dudes, 3 Legionnaires for 5 mana. Seems like a decent deal, but of course you can't control when and where they spawn, except the initial ones. Idol of Sacrifice! This has been very strong previously. One of the previous buffs has now been reverted, no longer gains haste. So that means it will move slower, and of course its DPS will be slower overall. I think that's a healthy change. That's a very strong strat. And as we mentioned with one of the new cards, Vux Clutch Cooker, he does have the ability to drag the idol off of face. So it'd be interesting to see if we see that out and about. Next up is a change to Jinglong. Now, Jinglong has been kind of busted for a while, where you could permanently stun units underneath it if you had lots of cheap spells to cycle. You're not going to be able to do that quite so easily anymore. So his phase cooldown is going up from 2 seconds to 2.5 seconds. Now the phase cooldown is when he disappears and then comes back, you've got to wait a certain amount of time before he can disappear again. And that's going up from 2 seconds to 2.5 seconds. But why is that half a second important? Well, the stun he does when he comes back is 2 seconds. So previously, the units that he stunned were stunned for his entire cooldown, and then he could disappear without taking damage. Now there's going to be only half a second, but hard-hitting units will definitely be able to kill him before he can disappear again. So whilst you can still do perma stuns with him, it's going to be a lot more difficult, and I think that's a nice, healthy change. Next up is a change to Spawn of Fury. We spoke earlier about Milloween, the Golem getting mythic. This is another kind of nerf that's going to affect some Milloween strats. Now, on the surface, the Spawn of Fury card doesn't look like it's changed, but under the surface, the way the calculations work have changed. So previously what would happen is the Spawn of Fury would reduce the unit's current stats, but not its base stats. So if you raged a unit, the amount that it got from the rage would be based on its original damage, not its reduced damage, which I wasn't aware of that, and that's definitely not really how it should work, but that's been changed, so now it does work. So let's just look at an example. So previously, if you Spawn of Furied a Colossus and then raged it, it would get 443 damage, whereas now with the change in the calculation, it will only get 309 damage. Same with a Spirit. If you Spirit a Spawn of Furied Colossus, instead of having 1150 HP, it will have 1050 HP. So a change to the way that the calculations work, but what does it mean? It means a lot less buffs on Spawn of Fury units. And of course, remember, Spawn of Fury, you're going to have 2 of those units, so that nerf is going to be felt twice. So this is a healthy change, but I feel like one that should have already been set up like this. Right, next we have a nerf to the Spirit mechanic. Again, that's something that those units, the big Spawn of Fury Colossus units, will take advantage of. The Spirit mechanic, the health cap is going down from 400 to 350. So remember, Spirit is 40% of max HP between 50 and 350. So basically what this means is anything over 875 health will get less of a buff from the Spirit, whereas previously it would get more. So I think that's a healthy change, because Spirit on those big hitting units can be hugely, hugely strong. Right, small change to Stun Lancers. They're simply not having Slitherbind anymore. So that means overall just a little less value from them. Slitherbind, of course, is when they're attaching a Slitherbound to another Slither unit. Tantrum Throwers. These are going to spawn horizontally. For 2 mana, the value that they've been given is just way too strong. The units that you get, the fact you can take 2 bridges, it kind of means that for 2 mana, there's not really too many options that do what the Tantrum Throwers do as well as they do. So they're being changed to spawn horizontally, just like how the Stun Lancers spawn, so that you can't easily take both bridges with them. We saw a change to Jinglong. Xiaolong gets the same change. It's not going to be quite so impactful for Xiaolong, but a nerf nonetheless. Phase cooldown 2 seconds to 2.5 seconds. Okay, so those are the balance changes. Next up, we're going to look at some bug fixes. So we mentioned earlier about King Puff getting the same spell each time he picks up the spell Gift Puff. That's now been fixed. Fixed Ritual of Servitude not summoning 6 mana cards. This is a fix that I really like. We've seen a lot of people use Ritual of Servitude this season, even though they knew it was bugged and given them too much value. But now it should be fixed, and I'm looking forward to being able to use it again. Finally fixed the Mecha Apep visual glitch. That's with the skin. Fixed the Frozen Aura description. Fixed Bearvalanche master damage. We spoke about that earlier. Also fixed the Bearvalanche animation occasionally being reversed. If you've seen the bears running in the opposite way and thinking what the heck's going on, that would have been that bug. Stopped Incubus from using Nether Step while frozen. I think Jackie is going to be very upset about that. Stopped Caber Tosser from throwing the log whilst frozen. Attempted another fix of the Border Patrol trigger indicator. That's just the yellow border around the card when it's active. Fixed Nether Step and Combustion being able to invoke ability cards. Removed the indicator for more wildcards being available on card promotion. Fixed perk timers malfunctioning in speed adjusted replays. Removed Crystal Sentry flavor text to make the actual description not get super tiny in formatting. Fixed the Magnetic Bombs description not mentioning reduced damage against masters. And now some adventure changes. Fixed Shock Rock Relic affecting the wrong units. I guess this could be Adventure stroke Mayhem if you think about the Masters of Misadventure Mayhem. Removed Combustion from High Five Bucket. Fixed Rimagal perk description. And finally, updated Buckets and Relics availability for Masters in older adventures to match the most recent versions. And there we have it. Bug fixes. Right, so Mechanized Menace. As mentioned, version 1.44. It's dropping Thursday, the 2nd of February. That we're going to have a new season pass. 2 new cards. That's Vux, Clutch Cooker, and the Net. I put Net Gunner, but I think it's Net Blaster. New skin is the Crystal Dark Fury King Puff. As we saw, a bunch of balance changes and a bunch of bug fixes. I'm excited. Hopefully you are too. Now, as a reminder, don't forget to claim your end of season rewards, your guild rewards, your tri-team tourney rewards, etc. I always remind you in my videos and end up forgetting myself, but this is a reminder to me and you. Make sure you don't miss out. Right, let me know in the comments what you think about the upcoming season. What do you think of the new cards? What do you think of the balance changes? What do you think is going to be broken? What do you think is going to be OP? What do you think is going to be too weak? I want to hear from you in the changes, in the comments, sorry. And of course, let me know if there's any videos, anything you want me to cover specifically, any units, any mechanics. Again, let me know in the comments and we'll get those videos made and help improve your Minion Masters knowledge. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video here. If you are enjoying the content, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help. And I'll look forward to seeing you guys on the battlefield in Minion Masters, our favourite free-to-play game.